concise it, I believe, to say, what is it that I'm in? What options do I have? What do I think about myself? What part am I playing in this particular situation? You cannot appreciate the sweet until you've had the bitterness.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You can't appreciate the sunshine until you've had the darkness. So my name is Frankie Stewart. I was born Frankie Brown in Tennessee, only child of a mother and a father who also were only children. And they subsequently divorced. Perhaps, I guess I was maybe 2 years old or something like that. And my mother decided she wanted to go back to school. And so I was raised primarily by an uncle and an aunt and two uncles. My childhood was fantastic. And I look back on those days with such fond memories and such wonderful feelings in my spirit. And I do believe that childhood has a lot to do with who and what we ultimately become. Of course, then, when I went to school, primarily, I must be honest and confess that I really went to get a husband who could support me in the way that I was accustomed to being supported. Because in those days, Black women of that era basically had three choices. You were either a teacher, you were either a nurse, or you were a housewife. Well, I can't stand the sight of blood. And I decided, okay, I could teach if I had to. So when I went into Tuskegee, I went in as an English major. But I was really looking for the husband. Managed to find him I would say my first 2 weeks. Didn't know that he was going to be the one, but it turned out that indeed he was the one. So we got married my freshman year in college. I finished my freshman year out, and then I had twin boys that summer when school was out. Well, this was just wonderful. Now, being a romanticist, his name was Leon. I wanted all my children named so that I could spell his name, their names. So we had selected 2 boys' names and 2 girls' names, and the boys were Lonnie and LeBaron. So when the twins were born, I just automatically took those 2 names. Then a couple of years later, had another boy, decided just to name him Leon like his father. And then the 4th boy was born, and I named him Lejean, after Lejean Vermouth. So here I have my 4 boys, and my life is perfect. Things are right on target. I'm doing what I think a good wife should do. I'm cooking. I'm cleaning. I'm taking care of my boys and just doing all of that sort of thing. Never intended to have a job because in my estimation, I had completed all of those things that I had wanted to do. I was a receptionist for Kaiser Permanente. I was a receptionist, and we're talking 1963. 62, 63, somewhere in there. And it was great. I loved my job. I had a lot of fun because I had 4 little boys. And although my husband was working, I thought it would be advantageous for the family if I were to continue to work. And so my husband agreed, and I continued. 2 years later, I was offered a position of senior receptionist and at another location. I accepted. Got there and just sort of fell right into the thick of things. And then I was promoted to an assistant supervisor. And then a little bit later, I was promoted to a supervisor. And that was just wonderful. Now understand, I didn't have a degree. I didn't really know what supervising per se was all about. But what I did understand was how to treat people. And that was most important. In 1980, I thought about the fact that I was supervising people that had degrees, and I didn't have one. So I thought, well, okay, I better go back to school. So in 1980 September, I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills, which is just a stone's throw from where I live. And I couldn't decide what I wanted to major in. So I decided, okay, I'll major in music because I knew a little bit about a lot of things. But on and on and on. So I ended up taking music as a major that first quarter. And then the third quarter, I started to think maybe I might want something a little different. And I decided to go into sociology. March of '83, I completed my bachelor's degree in sociology. Now, let me just kind of back up a little bit and just sort of share with you where I was in my life, in my married life, because that is all a part of the story.
Yes.
My husband, and I loved him dearly. I still do, even though he's dead, but I love him. He was just my heart. But he was a philanderer, womanizer, whatever term you want to put on it. He was that and all of that and more. But part of why I wanted to go back to school too, in dealing with him and his idiosyncrasies, if you wish to call them that, I felt like if I focused on something for me, in those days, though, women of my era didn't really think about, okay, I had two criteria. One criterion was that I would not at all be involved with someone who beat me. So he never physically beat me. And I would not be involved with someone who was a drunkard because I didn't want that kind of thing. But you see, it's a little different now because in those days, I guess we didn't even know the term domestic violence. That had not been created. At least I didn't know of it. And even though with him, there was a mental and a psychological, if you will, sort of a thing going on. I didn't really understand in my head where that I considered that violence.
How domestic violence wasn't even a thing, wasn't even known, wasn't even labeled back when you were going through your experiencing with your husband. And by the way, once this behavior started, one, how old were you? And two, how old was your marriage? How far were you into your marriage at this point?
7 years.
7 years, okay.
We had been married 7 years. I became aware of it. Now, I got a sneaking hunch that it had occurred before then, but I, in my naivete, perhaps did not pick up on some signs. But 7 years, there's the old 7-year itch. And 7 years, I was able to determine that was the case. Now, one of the reasons I sort of went along with this whole thing was because, number one, I loved him. But number two, I have to take, I don't know whether you want to say credit, but I have to take responsibility for the fact that I think if I had wanted to get a divorce at that time, I would have felt like a complete failure because when I got married so quickly in college, and my parents had different thoughts for me, different ideas for me, different aspirations, if you will, for me. And so I'm sure that somewhere in the dim recesses of my mind, I did not want to admit that I had made a mistake. Now, perhaps had I confronted him with, look, if this happens one more time, you're out of here. But I didn't do that. I had 4 little boys and like I said, I loved him madly and on and on and on. So each episode would happen and somehow I would conveniently find out what was going on. And then he would, oh baby, this is not gonna ever happen again. I'm so sorry and blah, blah, blah. And you know how you make the statement you believe because you want to believe. So that's what I did. And I thought that perhaps it was something that I was doing. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I was not sexy enough. Maybe there were things that I could do to turn it around. But Symone, I was able to determine as the years went on, it really wasn't about me. it wasn't me at all. It was his own inadequacies, his own need to be the man, to be the strong man, and all of that kind of thing, and all the ladies. But I still made excuses for him. And I was still foolish enough to believe that each time, okay, this is really going to be the time. We're not going to have any of this anymore. And might I add, he and I had a whale of a good time together. We had a wonderful time. When he was good, he was very, very good. But when he was bad, he was horrid. In the meantime, when I decided to go back to school in 1980, I think a lot had to do with trying to make sure that I did something for me. And that in and of itself would take my mind off of him and his antics, if you will. And I must share with you, through all of the angst and the agony and the problems that I went through during those years, my kids were completely oblivious to the fact that we were having problems. I didn't curse. I didn't slap him upside the head. He didn't curse and he didn't slap me upside the head. I mean, it was what happened between us was behind closed doors, and it was not, the children were not privy to it. So they still had and have that love for their father. And I did not want him to come back and twist things around and say, oh, you know, your mother told me. And because they were obedient children, they would have listened to him. So I said, I need to get a trust. So that's when the Frankie Stewart Trust was born in 1991.
I want other survivors who are going to be watching this to know that, number one, life goes on after domestic violence and domestic abuse, and you make it what it's going to be. You make the decisions. Dreams happen, education happens, other marriages happen, children happen, life continues to happen, but it depends on your inner strength, your self-awareness, your drive to continue to live, your pursuit of other dreams. And the one thing that I noticed that was strong throughout was the self-awareness and the inner strength that your parents and that in your family grew in you and instilled in you, that allowed you to have, like you were talking about what you were going through with your first husband, and you made a conscious decision to continue your education because that gave you something else to focus on. And most survivors they're so inundated with what they're going through, they don't either see a way out or they don't choose to have a way out. So that took enormous strength for you to have that awareness to do that. And you, in your faith as well, your faith also is faith is something else. Like,
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It affords you a perspective and awareness that although, I mean, there are times where you fall off the rails a little bit in life, but it always brings you back. And some of those who are abused get into such a dark place that they can't see themselves out. They can't see their way out. So do you have any advice for people who are being victimized right now, and also people who have just gotten out of it and they're still kind of spinning and really don't know how to get themselves out of that state?
The most paramount advice that I would give is, number one, to know who you are. But more importantly, whose you are. Don't lose focus on what the real problem is. If the real problem is he beat you, then you get out of Dodge. Because nobody deserves a physical attack. Nobody deserves that. And let's talk about it. There are a whole lot of women that abuse men.
Yep.
And you know, years ago, we didn't even think about that. It was always the woman was the one who was beaten. But now, But these chicks, baby, are whipping on some of these fellas. And so it's a human condition.
Can you go a little bit into your 5 A's? And the reason I ask about those is because they're tangible tools that survivors could use to focus on, in their process of healing.
For the last few years, I have been privileged to do a class at Cal State Dominguez Hills. And the name of the class is Aging Gracefully and Gratefully. 5 A's. Number 1 A is awareness. It's so important to be aware of the fact that things are changing, that you aren't what you used to be. But then the second A is acceptance. Because a lot of times we can recognize that maybe something is changing, but we like, well, I don't care. It's like, okay, give me something simple like wearing makeup. The makeup that a younger woman used to wear, an older woman doesn't look as good as she used to. So you are aware that you're getting older, okay? But you gotta accept that. The third A is adaptation.
Adaptation, okay.
That's the third A. So once you realize that you have gotten older and you accept it, then there are some things you have to adapt to. For example, I have to accept the fact that I can't run up and down the steps in my high heels like I used to. I don't like it, but I can't do it. So I adapt by wearing either wedge heels, lower heels, and holding on to the rail as I'm coming and going. So that adaptation is really important. And then the fourth A is appreciation. We have to be appreciative of where we are at this particular point in time in our lives. And yeah, it's not what it used to be. I look at myself and I see the lines and the and I'm like, okay, but hey, you still have a sense of life. You have a joy about life. And you have to be appreciative of that. But then the fifth A encapsulates everything. And that fifth A is attitude. Attitude. And so having that attitude, that positive thing, weighing the good against the bad, and deciding, because we make a decision, oh, my feelings are hurt. You hurt my feelings. No, I didn't hurt your feelings. You decided to let me hurt your feelings. You made me mad. No, I didn't make you mad. You made the decision. That's a lot of transactional analysis talk. But that's what transactional analysis is all about. You're okay and I'm okay, but we are going to accept the part that I could do differently and then look to you for some of the things that you might want to do. And if the things that you want to do are so diametrically opposed to where I am, then I need to say, okay, thank you, mwah, see ya, and move along. So attitude is so positive. And I look at the turmoil and the chaos that's going on in our country now. And I must admit that I am so conflicted, if you will, about how people are taking certain things. Black Lives Matter. They do matter. This is a bad situation. This cop shouldn't have done that. All cops are not bad. There are some bad cops, but then the majority of the cops are good. It's like any profession. There are some good preachers. There are some bad preachers. I don't know, Symone. It's such a squirrely position to be in. I mean, we have a choice. You can look at me a certain way. You know how women have, and I know you experience this. As tall as you are and as well put together as you are, I know some women look at you up one side and down the other.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. But you just, and let me share this with you. My great-grandmother died when I was 9 years old. And my great-grandmother was born the year that slavery was abolished. And she was the daughter of the plantation owner. So she was not educated, but she was fair of skin. Her skin was like an English complexion.
Wow.
She had hair down to her waist. She could literally sit on her hair. You would not know that she was a Black woman if she didn't live in a Black household. And I remember coming home and she said to me, "What's wrong, baby?" And I said, "The little girls were talking about me today." She gathered me to her and she kissed me and she said, "The time to worry is when they don't talk about you."
Mm-hmm. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And I have carried that with me all of my life. So when they look you up and down, you know, what's she doing looking at me like that? It's like, hey.
Exactly.
Exactly. So it's a matter of deciding how you want to handle. And that's what that last A is all about.
Attitude.
It's all about your attitude.
When I hear you talk about your 5 A's, I automatically think about it being who I am at this stage of my life. And being that I am one of a lot of other individuals who have experienced what I've experienced, I would like to talk about your 5 A's being a survivor so that people who are watching this can think about it, you know, in their own context, you know, they can apply it to themselves, their lives, and their experience. So when I think about awareness, I was raised in martial arts. So I was always taught to have a very strong inner awareness and also a very strong outer awareness of my own environment to make sure that I'm safe and the people in my environment are safe. I'm very grateful for having that inner awareness now ingrained in who I am as a person, because it has allowed me to stay the course of healing and knowing and inherently knowing what feels right, what doesn't feel right, what type of counseling is going to work for me, what I should be doing as a parent, sort of kind of being able to stay on the rails as I'm healing and healing from something that was very catastrophic. Accepting what I went through, accepting first and foremost what my part could have been in it, and assessing what I could have done differently, whether I could have done anything differently, and what I need to do from here on out. Number one, to heal, and to number two, never experience again what I had experienced, and to make sure that my son never experienced what I experienced. Accepting that my marriage was never going to continue, and there was nothing that I could do in order to influence him to love us the way that we deserved. There was nothing that I could do about that. Accepted it, moving on. Adapting on healing in this way from this, I had to adapt. And being a single parent, I had to adapt minute to minute to minute to minute to minute. And my head was spinning the entire time. But having that inner strength and that growing inner faith, because at the same time I was learning about God and growing in God at the same time. And so adapting to the changes that God was putting in front of me and the changes that I was learning that I needed to make in regards to healing, and the changes that I needed to make being a single parent of a very exuberant little boy. So there was a lot of adaptation that was needing to take place on a minute-to-minute basis. Appreciating everyone and everything. Although it was terrifying for the most part going through it. Appreciating the fact that there are beautiful people in my life, such as yourself.
Thank you.
Who I love. Miss Frankie, you got a special place in my heart. So, not gonna cry.
Thank you.
Given the state of the world, there's a lot going on for a lot of people, and every last soul on this planet is going through their own version of the same thing. And you can easily get lost in that.
Yes.
But there's another side of that coin. There is an appreciation for being alive. Mm-hmm. There's an appreciation for the next day. There's an appreciation for the love that you have in your life. There's an appreciation for the air that you breathe, for the clothes you have on your back, for all the blessings. There is so much to be appreciative of. The darkest time of my life has also given rise to the most love and support I've ever experienced, ever. I have met some of the most loving and supportive and giving people I've ever met in my entire life, now in the darkest 4 years that I've ever experienced. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And who would ever think?
Yeah.
Who would ever think that would happen? Attitude. Attitude is the through line of every last one of those A's.
It is.
It is your mindset that determines how you're going to be each day. You can either freak out because the shelves are bare and there's no toilet paper, or you can figure out how to get yourself the toilet paper, go home and be happy. When I think about my experience, my domestic violence experience, yes, it was horrible, but I also got two of the greatest blessings I will ever have in my entire life as a result of my relationship.
Right.
I met God. Mm-hmm. I was introduced to God, and I have my son.
Yeah.
So those are the two greatest things I will ever have in my life, and that is about attitude.
Mm-hmm. And in our lives, we go through those twists and those turns. Mm-hmm. But there's so much I want to share with people, to say how you can think of things differently. Mm-hmm. And earlier, I went to a professional too, but see, he provides certain things for us to be aware of. And let me just say, when you mentioned the two wonderful things in your life, God and Willie, mm-hmm. that those two things are magnificent, because you love him unconditionally. You really do. And he looks just like you.
It's a spitting image. He's definitely mine.
He really is. And
well, I love you, Miss Frankie, and thank you so much for the wealth of knowledge in your beautiful life and your advice. And thank you so much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it.
No, I love you. But I think I shared with you that I found yesterday when I was doing some cleaning, these letters that I had written to each of my sons.
Yes.
I'm just proud of you for all that you do and all that you are trying to do. Just don't lose sight on who you are, but more importantly, whose you are.
That's right. I am a daughter of God, warrior of God. That's right.
Yeah.